I'm inspired by my students because they can watch these videos at 2 times, 5 times speed, so I'm going to try to get through these slides in the next, but it's about biodiversity and nature-based solutions. So what is it? And then maybe we'll take a little side trip for a while, just to see what some of the challenges and concerns are, and then look at various solutions, starting with some of the contemporary ones, and then maybe looking to the past for solutions for tomorrow. So what is biodiversity? So I just chose one of these United Nations Climate Action website definitions, and it's the variety of life on Earth and the diversity with it, in the genetic diversity as well as diversity of ecosystems. And from the UN Environment Assembly 5.2, that was recent. That's nature-based solutions, actions aimed at protecting, conserving, restoring, essentially saying that if you take care of nature, it will take care of you. I think that's fair to say. So I guess I'm done with my talk, biodiversity and nature-based solutions. But in the meantime, let's go on a trip to Brazil, where it's 2 a.m. now, and our delegates hopefully are getting some rest after working all night. So this is the state of Pará, and this is the city where the COP is taking place, Belém, do Pará. And again, for those of you who speak Portuguese, especially Brazilian Portuguese, my sincerest apologies for making a massacre of your language. This is the convention site, the Hangar Convention and Fair Center of the Amazon. So I'm just going to pull out from this Google image, and you can see already that it's surrounded. It's kind of at the edge of the city, but there's forest around it. And we keep pulling away, and there's the city of Belém right on the corner of the Guamá River. And if you pull away further, you can see that there is. So that's the Guamá River. But if you pull away even further, this is the Pará River here. These are huge systems. And we go further still, and this is actually the Amazon and the Pará River. So they're part of the same system. It's incredible. There's an island here, the Ilha de Marajó. And just to give you some sense of scale, that's 220 kilometers across that island at the mouth of the Amazon. We're talking about a huge ecosystem here. And I'm not speaking about the Amazon. I mean, it's pretty awesome, but I'm just using it as a kind of metaphor for really what the fate of nature and the role of nature in climate-based solutions. Now, that's the town of Manaus, which is the capital of the neighboring state of Amazonas. There's Manaus. So again, you get a sense of scale. And this one I realized would have failed geography because I drew a line, but I went over the Andes to the other side. So I actually should stop over here. But this is Guayaquil in Peru. And that distance to Belém is 3,500 kilometers. So this is a huge, huge ecosystem. Can you imagine all the ecosystem services that this provides? Now, let's go further south in Pará State. This is, that's 8 degrees south and 54 degrees west. And we're going to do the same thing. Look at from this. Here's a view from the road. This is the Trans-Amazonian Highway. There's the estate. And then there's a little bit of ravine forest. And, now you pull away further, you see little pieces of larger forest. Pull away further still, and you can actually see this is carved out of the great rainforest. Further still, and you can see all of it, but it looks like a kind of small area. But if we go a little bit further, I think the site is somewhere in here. I think the next slide will show with the pin. That area around that cleared area is 28,000 square kilometers. That's a huge area of clearance. That's a lot of forest that was cleared. And if you a similar area, not quite, you see, but I was too tired to do it accurately with this Google Earth. But a similar area would take us from Singapore to Ipoh and back. To give you some scale of this, so just some from this. Consortium of NGOs that span the Amazon. They did some deforestation figures. There they are, eight NGOs in 6 countries. There they are. And if you look, This is the amount of deforestation from 2000 to 2020. And you can see, of course, Brazil being the biggest, 440,000 square kilometers cut. Of course, the forest is huge, but roughly 10% of the forest was cleared during that period. And what are some of the impacts of that clearance? Well, here's a paper from 2022, I believe. And essentially, the authors found that the forest loses resilience, the ability to bounce back after disturbance. And it's related to a couple of things. Rainfall, so the drier areas seem to have lost their resilience earlier, and the areas near human settlements. I guess that's a fairly obvious, it makes sense. And the authors concluded that maybe 75% of the Amazon has decreased resilience over the past 2 decades. Now, this is an interesting paper that came out in 2021 from a group of Brazilian scientists, most of them from the University of São Paulo. If you look at the my directions are bad, southeast Amazon, so the blue represents the net carbon coming out of the forest, right? The carbon flux. Red is the amount that's burned off. So if you take the amount that was burned and subtract that from the net, the overall flux, you still have a net carbon release from the forest. So this part of the Amazon is no longer a carbon sink. It's releasing more carbon than it can absorb. And the fear is that if there's more forest loss, a similar fate could be. And then you hit a transition point from forest to savanna. And then once you get to that savanna state, it's very hard to come back to forest. So that is worrying. Here's another one. This is a really interesting paper. This just came out recently, like a couple months ago. This is a study of some of the cleared areas, and what they looked at is density of vegetation. But I think the main takeaway, luckily there's this graphic that made it easier for me because I'm not very number savvy. But if you look at the impact of deforestation here on increases in temperature, the deforestation leads to a very rapid increase in temperature, and after that it plateaus. So the early deforestation actually makes the big impact on regional temperature. Whereas if you look at the temperature, the sort of global warming, the background warming, it's an incremental increase. So the deforestation really, really accelerates very quickly the warming effect. And if you look at the relative percentage of, is it global climate change or deforestation that leads to some of the changes, it turns out that decreased precipitation in the Amazon is primarily through deforestation. Three-quarters of that can be ascribed to deforestation rather than to overall sort of background climate change. So again, really quite fascinating. We've been down this road before. The conservation community has always tried to look for solutions that might, so these win-wins for conservation and for the business sector, for example. So I remember when I was a student, I always say that when I was a student 40 years ago, but, people were talking about nature being the pharmacopoeia, and maybe there's yet to be discovered cure for AIDS somewhere in the rainforest. So that's a good reason to just conserve it. And then it was pointed out, of course, that you could, once you discover the drug, you can synthesize it. So there's really no need to protect the forest just to keep, you don't extract from the forest, right? So the Red Plus system, some of you work in that. And then currently we use the ecosystem services argument. So these are the kind of not counter arguments, but just to show that there are these other prevailing challenges. But there's something that was launched last week, and I think maybe the next speaker will talk about this, TFFF, the Tropical Forest Forever Facility. This is a fund contributed by governments and the private sector. They launched it last week, $5.5 billion. They want to grow it to $125 billion, invest it, take the dividends, and pay it to countries to leave forest standing. So it kind of closes a loophole in some of this these funding facilities. And so here's an article from last week in The Guardian on this. Lots of news on this. The nice logo, too, by the way. That's the New York Times story on it. And it's supported by people with real street cred, right? There's the Brazil's environment minister, Marina Silva. This is a minister for indigenous peoples from Brazil. These are the business folks and the Lord Zach Goldsmith of the Bezos Earth Fund, and also people from the developing in Ghana and Indonesia. So this looks very promising. It looks very promising. I don't know enough about these funding mechanisms to really critically assess, but people who I respect a lot are putting their faith in this process. But the last couple of minutes, I just want to say, maybe there are some answers all along. So one of the interesting things about this COP is President Lula wanted really to bring the voice of the indigenous people, really make it prominent. And if you look at indigenous sort of traditional land use, this is the HIMA model, which has been in the Middle East for 1,000 years and then rediscovered. And it's basically let the community manage the landscape. They'll do it sustainably, and at the same time, biodiversity can thrive. This is the Society for the Protection of Nature in Lebanon. Here's something from the place I grew up. So apparently, pre-contact, the population might have been 1 million, not much lower than in Honolulu today, but they managed to support that population on 15% of the land. No imports, of course, in those days. Today, 85% of the land is cleared, and we have 90% imports. So there's something gone wrong in the way we kind of manage that landscape. So maybe some of those lessons can also inform policy today. And of course, there needs to be good policy, good governance, enforcement, all of those things for sure. But what is this for? Is this more than carbon? It's more than just physics, right? I'm sorry I didn't put insects or bacteria or fungi for those of you who but look at, this is what we are also protecting, and including this reef system at the mouth of the Amazon that was only discovered in 2016. A reef and sponge, a coral and sponge, 50, 100, 200 meters below, with all this sediment and the fresh water rushing over it. Just incredible. And this is just one of hundreds, thousands of wondrous places around the world, which hopefully together, all these different sectors working together can protect, possibly, hopefully, as part of a climate solution, nature-based solution, or maybe for other reasons too. This is just the last stanza of a poem by the poet Gerard Manley Hopkins. I'm not cultured. I had to ask my wife for some suggestions. But aftercomers cannot guess the beauty being 10 or 12, only 10 or 12 strokes of havoc unselve, the sweet especial scene, a rural scene, sweet especial rural scene. Thank you very much.